I'll certainly have, okay, recording in progress. So I'll certainly have some problems with the language. Sometimes I'll have to, think what is the correct word to speak. So I have to problem. But if I have a big problem, then I'll only read the slides from my presentation. They are all already there in English. And I have to thank very much again for the invitation. And I would like to send, in the name of our Rudolf Steiner branch in São Paulo, we have a couple of branches here in our city. The Rudolf Steiner branch, which is directed by my wife, Sonia, who is also watching us. And so I would like to send all of you our greetings from our branch. Well, my professional field was computer science. I was a professor of computer science at our main university in Brazil, the University of São Paulo. And you look at this page, at the front page, you have my homepage address, but you don't have to write it down. If you write just my first and last name, Valdemar Setzer, on Google, you'll get immediately to my homepage, where on top you see my email address, and there is a menu in English, a menu in Portuguese, and this presentation is there. So if you look for presentation in Portuguese, it's like this: apresentações, presentations. There is a link there. In fact, I think I forgot to put the link to the English presentation. I'll do that later on. And then I have a list of lectures that I have already held, and lectures that are being programmed. So there you also find a link to this presentation. So you don't have to write down what I'm going to show you in the presentation. Maybe you could write some of my blah blah, among the what I'm going to present you in the presentation. And what I'm going to present you now is a special view of the social threefold order, threefold social order. I don't like this translation threefold. It looks like I'm folding something. In German, it's Dreigliederung. Glied is member. Dreiglied is three member. Gliederung is to divide into members, or to consider into members. And that's how we translate it into Portuguese. Trimembração. It doesn't exist in Portuguese, this word, but we member, it's like membro in Portuguese. We translate it as trimembração, three membering of social order, right? Social organization. And I have to tell you that I'm inspired by this book by Christoph Lindenau. He had a famous book on Waldorf education, Introduction to Waldorf Education in German. I don't know if it was translated. I looked at the internet for a translation of this book, but I could not find one. It's called Soziale Dreigliederung, der Weg zu einer lernenden Gesellschaft. Social threefolding, the path to a learning society. And he and a person that came here to give lectures, Thomas Göbel, called my attention to a main aspect of social threefolding that I'm going to use through the whole presentation, through the whole lecture. So let's go on. I produced a form for assessment. So please, later on, in fact, we could put into the chat. No, I have to. I'm sorry.
I'll do it for you.
Yes,
Valdemar,
the
I'll do it for you.
address
It's
for the
fine.
form. Yes, the address for the form. And the main questions is what have been the most important things that I've learned, what are the biggest remaining doubts and comments. I use this for all lectures. Also, when I was teaching at the university, after each lecture, I passed this that is called 1 minute paper. If you enter the internet with 1 minute paper, you'll see many versions of this kind of assessment, which is a low-tech assessment, very, very good for having a feedback. And what I do is then later on, I'll make I'll copy all of your assessments and introduce that into a page. I have already sent, I don't know if I have already sent this address of that page also, the synthesis. I'll do that later. Okay, I want to begin with a verse by Steiner. Healing is only when in the mirror of the human soul the whole community forms itself, and in the community lives the strength of the individual soul. What does it mean? It means that a community, a working community, is only healthy if the whole community mirrors each participant in that community, each worker, each participant, right? That means the community is for the mirrors each human soul, and uh, in the community lives the strength of each one. That means we should, in each community, working community, a study group, or whatever, we should feel the strength of each individual participating that. And he called that the motto, this motto of social ethics, motto der Sozialethik. Well, I'm sorry, this Mark should not be here because I have not entered the first chapter yet, first section. Never mind. So I'm going to present you with what I call an individual social law, a law that applies to each individual when this individual is a member, is participating of society or of a community or a working group or whatever. So the first question I would like to ask you is, do you think there are absolute social laws? Are there absolute social laws? What do you think? Could you answer that? Because in general, people think that there are no absolute social laws. This is a cultural thing. There are, I think, people, Eskimos, that when a person is very old, they let these people alone on the ice to die, right? It's euthanasia, but euthanasia, I don't know how to spell that. But anyhow, uh, uh, so many people think that there are no absolute social laws. So I'm going to present you with what I think is an absolute social law. So the next question is, why are you here? Can you answer that? So maybe you would answer, to learn new things, to meet people with the same interest, which is not exactly the case because we are not present in a lecture. We are in a remote lecture, right? But anyhow, we can meet somehow, and later on maybe we'll have questions and so on. Maybe you are here because you had a curiosity. How is this guy from Brazil? Brazil is going to present us with this theme, right? With this subject. Or maybe you didn't have anything better to do, so you are spending your time here, watching the lecture, right? So this all is to satisfy your needs. All these are your needs. So you are here to satisfy some of your needs. And the next question is, why am I here? And the answer is I'm here to exercise some skills, right? Some abilities, some skills. For instance, share my knowledge, my skill of interesting you in the lecture and keep you awake during the lecture. In general, nobody sleeps during my lectures. Anyhow, see, but so I'm here, you are here to satisfy your needs. I'm here to exercise skills, right? And how do my skills meet your needs? Through interaction, through social interaction. Unfortunately, this is a remote interaction, not a present interaction. But anyhow, it is an interaction, right? And I hope that I'm not going to keep speaking just by myself. Maybe you could have the courage of answering some questions or making some remarks. Anyhow, so there is an interaction between us. So there is an individual social law. Every adult individual is a being with needs and skills. We interact socially to have part or her or his needs satisfied by exercising the skills of others. Other people exercise their skills to satisfy one's needs. And to exercise her or his skills to meet part of the needs of other people. You see, and I think this is absolute, absolutely absolute, because everybody is like that, right? Everybody has needs and everybody has skills. You know, it could be a housewife, you know, exercise her skills of preparing meals and providing comfort for the partner and so on and so forth. You know, there is always interaction between socially present people, not people that are isolated in caves, right? But socially, people that live socially, they have, all of them have needs and skills, right? And this is the situation. So I think this is a real individual social law which is formulated. So this is an absolute law and applies to all human beings who live in society. And it has as much validity as any physical law. For instance, if a building or a bridge is designed and constructed not following the physical laws, it will fall down, right? Physical laws are how do you say, are inexorable. You know, they are always in effect, right? For instance, the gravity, wind. I don't know if you know that tall buildings have to take into consideration the strength of the wind when they are designed, the strength of materials, etc. And the result, if the physical laws are not followed, there is a physical disaster. A bridge will fall down, a building will fall down, right? But if this individual social law is not followed, the result is individual social miseries, right? And suffering, right? This is the result of not following universal social laws as this one, right? And there could be lack of social and personal development. There could be a regression, right? Okay. And now the interesting thing is that the satisfaction of needs comes from the outside to the inside of each person. I call that the inwards, right? I hope it's correct. The exercise of skills, of abilities, is from the inside of the person to the outside. It goes outwards. So the satisfaction of needs goes inwards, and the exercise of skills go outwards. You see the polarity between both, right? And the interaction, there is an alternation between going inwards and going outwards, right? This is the interaction. It is a result of interaction. So we have a polarity and the middle element. This is a typical Goethean consideration, looking for polarities and then the middle element that makes the connection between the polarities and have this parts of the polarities, the polar characteristics. Well, so this was the absolute individual social law. Now let's examine the types of needs of social interactions and skills, right? Every human being is a natural physical being, right? Every human being is a social or soul being. I don't know, I didn't know how to express that better. Every person is a soul being, has a soul. And every person is an individual being, which is an expression of his or her spirit, right? Therefore, there are natural, social, and individual needs, interactions, and skills, right? Physical, soul interactions and needs, and spiritual needs, interactions, and skills. So let's examine them. So the human being, as a natural physical being, has physical needs. For instance, food, clothing, housing, transport, light at night, etc. Everything that we need physically, right? Transport and so on. These are all physical needs. And the physical interactions is with the world, the material world, minerals, plants, animals, humans, and also machines. I should have written here machines. Let me write down, well, what, 12, no, 12. Okay. And what is the exercise of physical skills? Our physical work, of manual work, lecturing, like I'm doing. So I'm speaking, you know, I'm producing something physical, right? I'm exercising the ability to speak. Artistic activities are also physical activities because they are all expressed physically, right? There is a phrase that I like, and I thought it was a Goethean from Goethe, a phrase like this. Science is the idea expressed as concepts. Art is the idea expressed as concrete objects, right? Also music, right? So this is, but I could not find that in Goethe's works. So maybe it comes from myself. I'm not sure. Anyhow, it's in the Goethean spirit, right? So as a soul being, there are social. So we saw physical needs, interactions, and skills. Now let's see the social needs, interactions, so on. What are the social needs? Education for children, adults, right? Information for adults, knowledge, support. I make a very clear distinction between information and knowledge. You can see that in a paper which is called in English data, information, knowledge, and oh my goodness, competence. Data, information, knowledge, and competence. At my homepage, you can find that. So support from other people, you know, also moral support, you know, the social needs, encouragement, tenderness. Every person has a need for tenderness. I hope I'm being clear here. And how about social interactions? Well, these are the relationships, agreements, commitments, contracts, rules of conduct. All of them, all of them are social interactions. And so what regulates social interactions, you know, are part of this area, right? Agreements, commitments, contracts, these regulate the interactions, right? Uh, uh, how about exercising social skills, right? Organizing social organisms, as you have organized your branch. Uh, Andre told me that it was already organized in 1953. Our branch, Rudolf Steiner branch, was in 72. So you are much older than we are in terms of branch. Making agreements, one makes the agreement. So this is a skill. Promoting interaction, giving support and encouragement to others, having understanding and tolerance to others, giving tenderness, this is very important, solving conflicts, educating, healing, all of these are social skills that we perform socially, right? So how about spiritual needs? So we saw physical needs, we saw soul needs, right? Now, how about spiritual needs? Uh, for instance, I thought about correct development. Everybody should have a correct development, moral development, and so on. And this is a spiritual need. We should have an environment enabling self-education. This is a spiritual need, right? Freedom, this is very important. Everyone has to have freedom to self-educate and so on, and do whatever she or he finds important. So this is a spiritual, I think freedom is a spiritual need, right? External freedom, right? Free will is internal freedom. Well, spiritual interactions, I think, with other human beings as spiritual beings, like, for instance, exchanging ideas, right? Ideas are not in the physical world. They are in the conceptual, they are in the Platonic world of ideas. So we are exchanging spiritual things when we are exchanging ideas. And we exchange with the spiritual world. When we have new ideas, we are interacting with the Platonic world of ideas. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you are acquainted with the fact that whenever we see an object, like a book, for instance, I call this a book. This is a concept, right? The concept is not physical. The concept is in the spiritual world. So we are constantly having interaction with the spiritual world when we are attaching, associating concepts to what we see, the objects we see, the persons we see, and so on. And helping spiritual beings and receiving help from them. We know this very well from anthroposophy, right? Well, how about exercising? We saw spiritual needs, interactions. How about exercising spiritual skills? Having new ideas, right? I have a bit of difficulty with this conception of Steiner that our thoughts are always mirror of the past. I have the tendency of considering that we are able to insert new ideas into the spiritual world. And I have some examples. For instance, the zipper, the zipper for clothes. I know. I think this was not taken from the physical world. Was a new idea that gave birth to a physical object, right? And there are other things that I could mention, right? For instance, computers, they don't exist in nature, nothing similar. So this was a new idea. But anyhow, having new ideas, a spiritual skill, setting one's own goals, objectives in life, self-education, exercising freedom, artistic and scientific creation, all these are spiritual skills. Okay, now I would like to cover some of my contributions, my personal contributions. I think that individual social laws was also a contribution of mine, but I'm not sure. Anyhow, but this will be what I'm going to show you is some of my own ideas. First thing is the person. Oh, I also want to tell you that these attitudes and exercises, you could start exercising after the talk, after my lecture. I'm going to give you now some impulses for your social life. First thing is perception of the other person. And this perception is a physical perception, right? And it's divided into two areas. So having a social interest, right, for the other person, which means being open to the other person and having an interest to the other person. Suppose you are in a bus, I don't know if in your places buses are having people are running, here in São Paulo, in Brazil, they never stop. At some time there was a limit of people inside the bus. But anyhow, you are in a bus and you are sitting next to another, or in a plane or train, you are sitting next to another person. What does it mean having interest to the other person? Being open to the other person, have an interest. And how do we do that? We start a conversation. For instance, saying, it's cold here or it's hot here. How long is this journey going to take? How many bus stops are there until I have to get out of the bus, and so on. So we start a conversation. If the other person wants to speak, he or she will start speaking, And I have a very interesting experiences in this field. For instance, once in the subway, there was a girl with a baby on her lap, and I started talking to her. And she started to tell her life and how difficult it was, how much time she had to take the baby to her mother and then back and so to her work and so on. I showed interest to her when I spoke to her, you understand? And she needed at that time to speak about her life. And she started speaking and speaking and speaking, you see? So this is what it means being open to the other person and to have an interest to the other person. Always asking about his or her life. Everybody's life is an infinite series of experiences. Very, very interesting. It's just a matter of having an interesting interest on asking, right? And one should also talk a little bit about oneself if the other person asks for it, right? So this was social interest from the outside to the inside, on the way inwards, right? Now, social sensitive goes to the outside, outwards, right? This means perceiving the other's needs. Here we have again needs, skills, and interaction. What are the other person's needs? What are the other person's skills? Is there an interaction between ourselves, right? So this is something that we could think when we meet somebody, immediately start thinking, what is the need of that person? For instance, that girl in the subway had a need of speaking about her life, right? And I was the listener to it, interested on her life, and perceiving the other person's skills, right? This is very important in working groups and study groups and so on, right? But everywhere. And also, one should be aware: is there an interaction happening between ourselves or not, right? So this is something one could be aware of, right? Now, this was perception of the other. Now there is identification with the other person. This means feeling with the other person, which is the most typical of this area. You'll understand why. And for instance, having compassion, and my wife was also watching us, having compassion, and my wife introduced this word in Portuguese. I translated it into English, comjoy. Compassion means having passion with another person or for another person. Comjoy should be having joy with another person. That means when a person is suffering, we cannot suffer her suffering, but we can suffer with her, with her or him, right? With her or him. And if the person is happy, we could also be happy with his or with him or her, right? So this is what I called comjoy. My wife translated into Portuguese from the German. Mitleid is compassion, and Mitfreude is comjoy, having joy with the other person, right? Then this was feeling. Now we can think with the other person. That means knowing and understanding the other, right? So we think in the way as the other person thinks. As long as we understand the other person and we know him or her, we can think with the other person, right? And feeling, thinking, and there is willing missing. Now to willing. What does it mean, willing with the other? is executing actions according to the other person's will, if we recognize her or his will as valid, right? So we execute actions according to the other person's will, right? So we see, you see here we have a folding of the soul activities: thinking, feeling, and willing, right? And how about having all of these for the other person? That's what I call having a communion with the other. I hope this word is correct. Communion, right, with the other person. When we are able to feel, to think, and to will with the other person. Okay. Somebody was in the waiting room, Andre. Well, anyhow, I'm also the host. That's what I'm receiving these messages. Oh, I'm sorry, Andre. You are also the host, right?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay, so you let the people get in.
Yeah,
Okay.
I will take care of it.
So we had perception of the other person, identification with the other person, and now we have a social action, which is the spiritual side, right? Having a social responsibility, feeling that we have to do some social actions, having the impulse for taking the decision of acting. We have the impulse of doing something socially. This is what I call social responsibility, and this goes inwards. We have it inside of us. Now, the social action that goes outwards, right? You'll see the polarity here, is doing something for another person. First, for instance, satisfying her needs, producing an interaction with the other, and creating space for her or his exercising her skills or his skills. You know, again, needs, interaction, and skills. You see, so this is what I call having a social action. But there are other types of social action, like, for instance, conscious pardoning, right? Being tolerant, and so on. So you see, here we have these three actions: social identification, social interaction, and social action, right? Social identification, social action. And I propose that you start practicing. In fact, certainly you practice that, but not consciously, or probably not consciously. So I'm trying to show that this all can be done quite consciously, right? You can see all of these later on when you download my presentation, this presentation. So, oh yes, social action, not only for another person, but also for society, right? Disseminating one's own ideas and intellectual, scientific, and artistic works, and producing books and papers and giving lectures and doing something artistic for society and so on. Acting socially also, and building and maintaining social bodies, social institutions, and working on them, right? That's what Andre does for the Rudolf Steiner branch. He's the communicator of the branch, right? Anyhow, so we have a summary. Perceiving the other is a social interest, having social interest and social sensitivity. The second, this is a physical, I think it's a physical action. Identification with the other is a soul activity, thinking, feeling, and willing with the other. And the social action, which I think is spiritual, having social responsibility and acting socially, right? Good. So for those that are acquainted with the soul threefolding, threefolding of the soul, I think the perception of the other involves mainly the sensitive soul or sentient soul. I don't know which one you prefer. Sensitive soul. I like sensitive because it has something to do with our senses, right? Also, animals have the sensitive soul. Identification with another person is we are using the rational and feeling soul. That's why we had here feeling, thinking, feeling, and willing, right? which animals don't have, higher feeling, not just, lower feeling, like pain, for instance. Social action uses the consciousness soul, having the responsibility to act and then acting socially. All this comes, I think, from the consciousness soul. I'm sorry. Thank you, Sonia, for having brought me water. So animals have only the sensitive soul. They are not able to identify themselves with another person, only instinctively, not consciously. And having social act, they are not conscious, right? They are not self-conscious. Anyhow, so now I would like to give an example on how to develop interest for others. And here I have a history, or story, I'm sorry, it should be story, story of two vendors, two female vendors. Suppose Stephanie in Israel. Hi, Stephanie. Suppose Stephanie wants to buy a shirt, a blouse, right? So she goes to a store, right? And there a vendor, a female vendor, sees that Stephanie is coming into the store and says, aha, here comes my commission, right? So she asks Stephanie, what do you need? She says, a shirt, a blouse. I hope this is correct, blouse, shirt. So the vendor then starts to show all sorts of shirts, telling marvelous things about those shirts. Look how beautiful this is. This is so original and so on. It passes so well to your figure. It fits. Thank you, Sonia. Fits so well to your figure and so on. And she shows a blouse. And then Stephanie takes that blouse and she's going to buy it. And then she shows another shirt and convinces Stephanie that one is also so good and so on. And then Stephanie grabs the two, and then the vendor says, but if you have a shirt, if you have a shirt, yes, you need pants and a skirt for to go with these shirts and so on. And she passes a pant, she passes a shirt and then passes a pant and then passes a pair of shoes, to go with all of that and so on. So Stephanie I'm sorry, Stephanie, but in the story you buy all of that, goes home, hangs all of these things and never use them because it was not what you needed, right? And you never go back to that store because later on you realize that, the vendor, I don't know how to say that in English, she not influenced, but anyhow, she influenced you. Okay. Now Stephanie goes to another store and she needs a shirt. And the vendor is another kind of vendor. She looks she looks at Stephanie and says, what do you need? I need a shirt. Oh, yes. Why do you need a shirt? To use at home, to go to a party, or to go to the synagogue, as Stephanie goes, and so on, right? What, Stephanie? Anyhow, yeah, okay. Anyhow, she keeps asking what kind of mustard she likes, what kind of tissue, and so on and so forth. And then after informing herself of all that Stephanie likes about shirt or what she needs about the shirt, she said, "You don't know. I think I have a shirt that passes exactly or precisely of what you need." And she shows one or two shirts, and Stephanie says, "Oh, this is exactly what I need." She pays for the shirt, goes home, and uses that shirt because it was exactly what she needed. So you see, there are two kinds of vendors here. One is egoistic, the first one, and the other is shows an altruistic interest. The first one had an egoistic interest, right? For instance, egoistic interest. What should I do with the other to satisfy my needs? The needs of that vendor was to have a bigger commission, right? As much commission as possible, right? To earn more, right? How can I impose my skills on the other? And the skills of the first vendor was to convince Stephanie that she should buy all those things, right? And this generates mistrust, suspicion. Stephanie will never go back to that store. Now, how about altruistic interest? The vendor thinks, what should I do to satisfy the other person's needs in general, not just vendors, right? What should I do to satisfy the needs? What should I do to create space and conditions for the other person to exercise and develop her skills, right? What should I do to interact with the other person? And these, if this is practiced, it generates trust and confidence. The contrary of the other, the egoistic interest that generates mistrust as suspicion, right? The altruistic interest generates trust and confidence, but it has to be altruistic without any selfish interest, right? Okay, not doing this just for the own person's needs or own person's wishes, right? So we have an additional social law. In social relationships, confidence is all the greater if, I hope expression is correct, is all the greater if in the satisfaction of needs regarding the other as a person with needs. The confidence is greater if we satisfy the other person's needs. In agreements, commitments, contracts, and so on, regarding the other as a responsible interaction, not just agreement, also interaction. I should write here, 24. Okay. In working together with other people, regarding the other person as a responsible, autonomous, and capable individual. The second vendor considered that Stephanie had the ability of deciding by herself what she needed, right? Okay, and then I have suggestion for a mental concentration. In fact, recently I was thinking that this should be called better a meditation exercise. The fact is that I make a very clear distinction between mental concentration and meditation. Steiner doesn't make this difference. For me, mental concentration is clear what it is, right? You concentrate your thinking on a certain subject, like for instance a pencil, right? Everything regarding this pencil or pencil is a mental concentration. If I concentrate on that subject, pencils, right? This is a mental concentration. Meditation for me is when we make a mental concentration using a spiritual subject, not a physical subject, right? Or personal subject, a spiritual, objective subject. And I think maybe this should be called meditation. So if we would be in a presence lecture, I would ask you to do the exercise, but here remote, I think it's better just to describe it, and then you can try practicing it. First, close your eyes, relax physically, feel that the muscles are relaxed from the feet to the head. They're all relaxed. You have closed eyes. And then produce an inner calm. This is a very, very special feeling, special inner activity, having an inner calm. So important nowadays. So important, because the world has become so agitated, so full of things that happen, mainly when we use the computer, and then it's the ultimate in agitation, right? So it's very important to produce sometimes, we can do it a couple of times during the day, produce an inner calm when we are just ourselves and not what the world forces us to think, to see, and so on, right? And to hear. So Close your eyes, relax your muscles, produce an inner calm. You are sitting, relaxed. Look at your neighbor. For instance, we have here named Jane has a neighbor there. Look at your neighbor. And the neighbor looks at Jane. I don't know the name of the Jane. Look at your neighbor. Now close your eyes again and imagine a flow of love leaving your heart and going to the other neighbor, to your neighbor, the neighbor that is close to you, right? Imagine a flow of love. You can also imagine a flow, a stream of light, full of love. The important thing is love. A stream of light going from you to the other person that is next to you. Then you repeat, open your eyes, look at someone far from you. If you are in a group, there is a person that is opposite to you, for instance, and do the same thing. Imagine a flow of love going from your heart to the other person. And then repeat for everyone in the room at the same time. Your love, spreading to all the people in the same room. It could be an office, could be some study group or whatever. Repeat for everyone. I'm sorry. This 5 is too much. 25. No, not for everyone in the room. Repeat. No, it's not in the room. Everyone in your neighbor. In the neighborhood, right? And then repeat for everyone. All people in your city, and then your country, and then your humankind. Imagine in an office that everybody would practice these, from time to time. Can you imagine how people would interact differently if they feel that they send love to the other people in the room? You understand? So this is I think this is a meditation exercise, because a flow of love is not physical, right? Good. Now let's see some constructive and destructive prerequisites. I call the individual prerequisites. I'm sorry, the title is not correct. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. Constructive prerequisites. For instance, positiveness. I don't know if this is correct. Being positive, right? And the contrary is being negative. Positive is one. Being positive, practicing positiveness is one of the 6 Nebenübungen, the 6 side exercises that Steiner gave in preparation for meditation. So, and Steiner says there is nothing 100% positive or 100% negative in the world. So we can always find some positive aspect of everything, of every person, and we should concentrate on that. And that's constructive. That's not destructive, right? And he tells this story about that fable, or the story of Christ going on a way with his disciples, his I don't know how to say that in English. What? Followers? No, his disciples.
Disciples.
What?
Disciples.
Disciples, great, disciples. I'm sorry, disciples. You can't imagine how many times I said senator, and then I discovered it was senator, disciple. Okay. So he was with his disciples on a way, and then they find a dog completely, I don't know how to say that.
Dead dog.
A dead dog, completely, how do you say, destroyed anyhow.
Disintegrated, yeah. Dead
disintegrated, body. Yes. And the disciples look away. They don't want to look at that dog. It's a horrible thing. And then the Christ says, but he how beautiful teeth he had. So you see, the Christ shows that one can also see something positive on the most horrible situation, right? Anyhow, this is positiveness, tolerance and intolerance. I'm going to go fast here. Having serenity, I hope this is correct. that means acting without being dominated by feelings and impulses. This is also one of the 6 Nebenübungen, the collateral exercise. This is another one: impartiality, objectivity, equanimity. Or the contrary is having prejudice. So being partial when talking another person, not immediately judging what she or he is speaking about, but being partial, receiving, objectively what comes to us, also for objects and so on, ideas mainly. Cooperation instead of competition, and we are unfortunately on a world constantly more and more competition, and the students, young children and young adults, they learn in school and college to be competitive when we should develop cooperation. Fortunately, since about 10 or 15 years, there have been books about cooperative games. We had in our Waldorf school, there are 5 or 6 Waldorf schools with high schools, with junior schools and high schools here in São Paulo. But one of them, Tornico, was the physical education teacher. He organized, for instance, soccer plays, and after each goal, he would mix the teams so that there was no competition. There was no competition between one team against the other, right? So they were all competing for the ball and not for each against the other, right? So one can also do sports. I practiced many years tennis. I used to play tennis. I don't play it anymore because I have discovered that ball games are not for old people like me, right? Anyhow, you go after the ball and don't think what you are doing. This is very bad for my age. Anyhow, I used to play a cooperative tennis. That means not counting points, not counting games or sets and so on, right? Just playing the ball. Doesn't matter if it it goes twice in the same court. It doesn't matter. You play it back and so on. So this is a cooperative sport, right? Abnegation and ambition, altruism and egoism, altruistic love, right? And selfish love. So these are constructive and these are the destructive. Speaking about egoism and selfish love, ambition, and so on, it's important to realize that capitalism is based on selfishness. And this comes back to Adam Smith in his famous book, The Wealth of Nations, of 1776. In a free market, an individual seeking her or his own interest ends up producing the good of his community through the principle of the invisible hand. That means if each one practices ambition and egoism, an invisible hand will come and make the community happy, right? And I copied a part of his book. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner. So our dinner is not giving us because of the benevolence of these people, right? The producers, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. This is also in the Wealth of Nations. So it's interesting to observe that today it is clear that this selfishness is destructive. Look at nature and humankind. We are destroying nature. I think the calculation is that in the year 2030 there will be more plastic in the seas as fishes in the seas, right? Can you imagine that? And all the pollution and so on and so forth. but also psychologically we are destroying humankind. For instance, giving electronic media to children and adolescents. But this is another lecture, right? Which I give since many, many years. The first time I gave a lecture against the use of TV as a leisure equipment, leisure instrument, was in 1972. And I have quite a bit of papers on my website about this, right? Okay, good. So this is also a psychic destruction of humankind. And one of the most successful ways of destroying humankind is destroying children and adolescents. You know, what kind of adults are we creating now? So now I would like to apply these ideas to family, to the family, a social group, institution, and society. And when I'll speak about society, probably you are going to hear what you are used to hear about social threefolding, all right? But we have a long way to get there. But I'm going to be brief here. You can download the presentation and read all about this. So actions in the family. Remember, needs, skills, and interaction would follow us during the whole lecture. So here they are again. In the family, what is the satisfaction of needs of each member and on the family as a whole? Of each member, education of each member, development of each member, right? It's a need of each member, support for each one. Tenderness is a very, very, very important point in each family, in each relationship, you know. It could be a pair, how do you say pair, casal? A couple, right? Is showing tenderness in every moment, not just in special moments. But if you pass by the other person, what do? I and Sonia, we caress each other. You understand? When they cross each other, we caress each other. We are showing tenderness at every time that we meet. Or when we speak, you know, I call her by the nickname I have. You know, I'm always calling her by her nickname that I gave her. You know, it's a show of caring for her or being tender for her. You understand? And I think try to do it, showing tenderness in every moment, not just in special moments, right? When we do that, we show that we care for the other person, right? And the other person is important for us. Of the family as a whole, physical support for the family, housing, for instance, is a need of the whole family. Objects for development, books, etc., for the whole family, right? How about social interaction? Remember, needs, interaction, and skills. How about social interaction of each member? I have to write here 32. Okay, of each member, for instance, establishing rules of coexistence. This in general is done intuitively, not consciously. But I think one could also do some establish in the social relations, in the family, some rules that each one follows. You know, we establish rules of coexistence in the family, right? Division of labor, right? Today I did the salad, right? And I washed the dishes, right? Okay. And Sonia cooks and so on and so forth. So I do our bed every day, every morning, right? So this is division of labor, right? And this could be done consciously also, not just intuitively, just do things that you are used to do. Considering the partner as a responsible adult. This is very, very important. This expression as responsible adult is a magic expression. We are going to have it in the next slides as well. respect for the developing individuality in children and adolescents. I think this is also part of the social interaction of each member to the others, of the family as a whole, social laws concerning the family as a whole, interaction with other families, community, humankind, what the family produces to humankind, this is I'm sorry, this is skills. I'm mixing already. Now we had needs, interaction, and skills. How about skills of it by each member, providing space and time for each one exercising her or his skills, right? So we provide this space for the other persons and time for the other persons in the family, acting as the other person expects. Remember those activities I expounded to you. Acting as the other person expects. This was part of identifying with the other person, right? Creating a unique family spirit. I find it very, very important. And unfortunately, it's in Portuguese. But on my website, there is a story written by Luis Fernando Verissimo of a couple that sits in front of the TV, and the TV breaks, right? And then the lady says, "What are we going to do next?" And the husband says, "Well, let's talk." So they start talking, and during the conversation, they discover that the husband was not her husband, and she was not his wife. During the conversation, she called him John, and he says, "I'm not John." And he calls her Mary, and she says, "I'm not Mary." And then they try to discover what happened, and what happened was that they exchanged, the couples with the couple next door. Why? Because they get home, they sit in front of the TV, and all of these couples do exactly the same thing. It doesn't matter if they exchange. But if one creates a spirit of the family, for instance, having very special interest. If it's a couple, doesn't matter what genders, right? If a couple try to discover something that is, try to develop something in common, something that both would like to study, to practice, or whatever, right? For instance, with my wife, I have anthroposophy, so we have lots of things to discuss and about the books we read and so on. And we both like theater and so on. But so suppose you like theater, then one of the things you could do is to start studying about theater, authors and plays and so on. Both study together, going together to theater, plays, and so on. So you develop a unique interest between yourselves. So this is a unique spirit that you develop, right? And this could be a family spirit. If you develop a family spirit, there is no sense in exchanging with another person. There's absolutely no sense. You understand? So I think this is a very important point. Maybe you intuitively do that, right? But it would be nice to do it consciously. So developing common worldview, common interests, and so on. By exercising skills by the family as a whole, acting together as a family, being an example. For instance, the family could make parties, invite people, to come, right? And then we'll see what happens with parties, with groups of people. Family could be an example, right? Now, actions in a social group. It could be a class, a college class, a school class, a meeting of people, study, for instance, a party in your home that you organize, a study group or working group, doing handicrafts or so on and so forth. How about actions in a social group? So how about needs? Of each member, there are individual needs like education, information, and so on. There is a social achievement that means in the group. The group could provide interaction with other people. So it's a need that everybody has, interacting with other people. the group could provide a space for all social action, for social activities, and so on. Of the group as a whole, space for the group, conditions for meeting and working, conditions, I mean physical conditions for meeting and working, structure, form of the group. It's very interesting to observe that the needs impose a form. Look at a class. You know, the class is there to satisfy the students' needs, right? Okay, and this imposes a form. The students are sitting there on their tables. There is a name for that. Or their desks, at their desks, and the teacher is standing in front of them. You know, this is a physical organization that comes from the need. So needs in general impose a form for the group, right? Structure and form. Communication with the outside for the group as a whole, and so on. And I just gave some examples. Social interaction in a group, by each member interacting with the others, and so on. Agreements with others, how the group is going to work, you know, rules for the group to meet, and so on. And no, look, I'm going to skip now some details because you can download and read by yourselves, right? But I would like to emphasize the self-management of the group. The group should not have a manager, a chief, a manager, but the group should direct itself in a self-management situation. Why? Because hierarchical relations are outdated, in my opinion. Because each person nowadays wants to feel like and be treated as a responsible adult and not being commended, right? So there is no place for that anymore. We are going to go back there when we talk about institutions. Exercising skills is acting in the group, acting to the outside as a group member, and so on and so forth. 36 has a problem. Okay. By the group as a whole, setting goals to the group, and so on, the form of working. Satisfaction of needs of each. Now in an organization, an institution, right? Should be an institution. 37 could be a factory, could be an office, you know, a society. Satisfaction of each employee, a salary according to one's needs, right? Adequate space to work, and so on. Knowledge of the whole organization. This is very, very important, that each employee passes through as many departments as possible, so the person has an idea of what the whole institution is, and not just his department. You understand? Of the institution as a whole, inputs, human resource, physical space, etc., etc. The social interaction, here I would like to come again to hierarchical organization. The organization chart should not be hierarchical anymore, because there is no sense in having a director, department director, president of the company, and so on and so forth, commanding what the others should be. What does it mean being a manager of a group, of a department? Being a representative of that group or department. You know, the representative for the other groups or departments in the institution, right? And representative means that he collects, and he has the ability of collecting the ideas, the impulses of the other people in the group, and taking these ideas, the suggestions, and so on to the other groups. You understand? I think this is the future of organizations. If each one is feels and is treated as a responsible adult. This is the magic expression, responsible adult. Nobody wants to be commanded anymore. Everybody wants to participate in the decisions, right? Well, I'm going to skip all this. It's all the same thing, rules and laws, regulating the public order, organization, and so forth, and exercising skills, acting in the organization. There is a message here that my internet connection is unstable. I'm sorry if there will be problems. I hope not. By the organization as a whole, creating and maintaining conditions for the development of each employee. This is very important. The employee is not there just to work, but also to develop herself or himself. And the organization should take care of that, should have an eye for the development of each employee, right? Or each member of the organization, of the institution, right? Etc., etc., etc. And society as a whole. And here we come to what you probably, some of you are used to understand under threefold social order. But you see, all of what we have been examining is also a social order in various dimensions, right? Society as a whole. The satisfaction of needs was called by Rudolf Steiner economic life. Remember that there are needs that are physical needs, right? Like production, distribution, and consumption of goods. These are physical needs. This is also threefolded, right? Production to the outside, distribution, alternating, and consumption to the inside. But I understand needs as physical, soul needs, and spiritual needs, right? Okay? Not only of material goods. For instance, libraries. Libraries do not provide a physical need, but right? And museums as well, right? Museums do not provide physical needs. What they provide is a need for knowledge, for we not feel. They provide soul needs, right? Maybe also spiritual needs, lectures, as I'm giving you, right? So what I'm doing now, I'm being part of the economic life. I'm satisfying needs. I'm part. What is happening here has been organized in terms of satisfaction of needs, right? But we are going to see what happens with myself. How should I be considered myself, right, in these terms? And the basic spirit is fraternity, solidarity, fraternity, brotherhood, right? It's another word in English, fraternity. But we are going to see why I'm using fraternity. Why? Because it's very easy to understand. If somebody's needs is satisfied in an exaggerated way, some other person will have less than what he or she needs. You understand? There must be a fraternal distribution of goods, and not some people having more goods than other people in terms of needs. Obviously, an intellectual person has some needs. A manual worker, right, has other needs. A person working in agriculture and so on has other needs. So the needs are not equal to everybody, right? But they should be there. Everybody's needs should be satisfied. How about social interaction? Rudolf Steiner called that. So going back, you see, economic life, in my sense, does not apply just for goods, but also for soul and spiritual goods or means, right? Social interaction. Rudolf Steiner called that the judicial and political life. This was the economic life. He called life judicial and political life. The other one was Wirtschaftsleben in German. Huh? Rechtsleben. I knew that. Rechtsleben, judicial and political life. Rechtsleben is the life of law, of everything that has to do with laws, right? Anyhow, the laws regulating rights and duties of everybody, human rights, and I would like to call your attention to the fact that we are developing human rights right now consciously. We are in a glorious time nowadays of the human rights. I'm going to go back to that. In terms of laws, here isonomy should rule. That means isonomy should be, everybody should be treated in the same way in terms of laws, not in terms of needs. Everybody has his her own needs, right? The basic spirit is equality. Everybody should be treated in the same way. So we had fraternity, now we have equality. What's missing? We are missing something that will come right now in terms of exercising skills. Rudolf Steiner called that spiritual life. So we had economic life, judicial and political life, and state life, and spiritual life. And this means providing services. In German, it's called Dienstleistung, providing services, providing needs, or satisfaction of need is called in German Bedarf, Bedürfnis, not Gebrauch. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that. Doesn't matter. Well, anyhow, providing services is a spiritual life. Providing needs for support and supporting, for instance, artistic creation, intellectual creation and scientific creation. All this is part of spiritual life. Educational creation, right? We are going to see what it means right now. And the basic spirit is freedom, liberty. I should have written freedom, liberty as well, because then we have the three mottos of the French Revolution: liberté, égalité, solidarité, fraternité. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. So we have these three, and what the contribution by Steiner was to show that each spirit applies to a special sphere, special area of society, right? So we have an abstract here: economic life is a satisfaction of need, and here fraternity should rule. Judicial political life, regulation of social interactions, equality, everybody is equal to the others. Spiritual life, exercising of skills, providing services. Exercise of skills also as organization, or an organization exercising skills of the whole, producing something, the whole organization, right? And this is what is called in English the threefold social order or threefold social organization. I repeat what I said in the beginning. I don't like these fold. Fold means, folding, folding something. In German is Dreigliederung. Glied is member. Gliederung is to member things, to dismember things, or to member, divide into members. So this is the way we translate it into Portuguese. Trimembração, three membering, right, of social organization. And why member? Why Dreigliederung? Why members? Because all of these areas of society interact with each other, right? Each has its own spirit, its own qualities, and should be independent of the others to some extensions. One should not impose something on the other. They should be independent, right? So they should be members as our members. Our members are, in some sense, independent. My hands are independent of my head, but my head influences my hands, and my hands influence my head as well, right? They are independent to some extent, right? I have senses here in my hand, but the main senses are in my head, right? So this is the membering of society. Okay, good. Look what Steiner said. I'm not going to read it in German because it would take some time. I have the translation here. My translation. Well, no. I don't remember if it's my translation or not. Or I looked at the Rudolf Steiner archive and copied from there. We'll see. If it's not a good English, it was my translation. Humanity will no longer have something to say without setting up its social organism in the sense of threefold. Humanity will no longer have something to say. Should keep quiet. Without setting, if it doesn't set up its social organism in the sense of threefold. Now look at this. Socialism for the economic life. There applies socialism. A social preoccupation, a social social organization, right, for the economic life, thinking socially in terms of economic life. Democracy for the legal state life. Here, democracy is the right place, not in the economic life, right? Here, equality is the main thing, right? And freedom or individualism for the spiritual life, right? So individualism is correct here. Everybody should produce, out of his or her own impulses and so on. But in terms of economic life, we should think socially what everybody needs, right? We are satisfying needs. This will have to be seen as the only salvation, or the real salvation of humankind. Interesting that he spoke that in a book called, or in a lecture series called Education as a Social Problem, the GA 296, right? Education as a social problem. And this was held before the starting of the first Waldorf school, which happened in September. This is August 9, right? So he had all these ideas already, and he organized the school having these ideas in mind. And he organized the Waldorf school because the workers of the Waldorf cigarette factory heard his lectures on social threefolding and said, we are not understanding very well what you are speaking. And he said, well, that's a problem of education. And the workers said, then we want another type of education for our children. And then Emil Molt, the director of that factory, gave the means for Steiner to organize the school, and Steiner had a very important condition that he should be absolutely free to organize the school as he wished and not as the factory wished. You understand? Okay, good. So Steiner also gave lectures on a social problem. I think medicine is a social problem. There is a lecture. Hygiene as a social problem. But he regarded everything as a social problem, like agriculture and so on, right? Arts, a social problem, and so on. So the basic spirits of freedom, equality, fraternity, or liberty, equality, fraternity should apply to all social spheres, individuals, families, social groups, organization, and society, leading to specific social laws, right? Here I have a problem also, 47. Okay, which now? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me pose the question. There is a problem with the animation there. At what area, at what sphere belongs a school? To economic life, to fraternity, to law, to rights, and to legal area, or to a spiritual area? life, spiritual life? Economic life, judicial life, or spiritual life? Which ones do you think? Which one do you think a school should belong to? How about that? Anyone would like to say what I'm expecting you to say? Don't damage my story. Stephanie? Well, okay. In my idea, a school belongs to economic life. Most people say that a school belongs to the spiritual life because it satisfies needs, the needs of education and development of students and their parents, right? The basic spirit should be fraternity, solidarity, right? Brotherhood. A school should be structured and classes taught according to the specific needs of its students and parents, but they are not physical needs. The problem here is mixing economic life with spiritual, with physical needs, right? And teacher skills should be organized according to the teacher skills and the interaction between all members, all these. But the school as a whole is providing means, providing education, so it's satisfying means. Okay. But a teacher giving a class is a representative of spiritual life because he or she provides services, exercises skills. So he is a representative in a class. He is a representative of spiritual life. So his basic spirit regulating his activities, freedom in his teaching, right? But he must always keep in mind, the teacher must always keep in mind that the needs of the students and if there is an interaction between him and his students, parents, and colleagues. You understand? In his class, he has a freedom of teaching the way he thinks best, the way the class requires, right? And this has to be improvised, right? And taught and so on. So can you imagine how classes would be different if each teacher would enter the class and regard his or her students as persons with needs, of what he's going to provide. This should be his main personal spirit, providing the education for the students, providing the needs the students need in terms of education. So, and here we have three social laws due to Lindenau. It's in his book in a different form, and I think also by Thomas Göbel. I think they talked together and then Lindenau wrote his book. Soziale Dreigliederung, der Weg zu einer lernenden Gesellschaft, social threefolding, the path to a learning society. I could not find the translation into English. It's a pity, because it's a very, very interesting book. And starting from these three characteristics, satisfaction of needs, interaction, and exercising of skills. The whole book is based on that. Well, a community of work is all the more fruitful. That means the results of the community of the work will be more fruitful if it is structured, the more it is structured on the basis of individual freedom. And the more sterile, it has many social laws, and they also come as a positive and negative ways, right? That's the way I formulated this one. And it will be the more sterile, that means will not produce what is needed, the more it occurs by outside determination, power, outside power, right? So for individual freedom, the individual should not be determined what he should do or he or she should do at every instance, right? Every moment. In a social group or in society, agreements and contracts are all the more robust. That means they will stay for long, right? They have validity. The more they emanate from the equality of conditions of the parties, right, involved, and they're all the more fragile. The contrary of robust. That's the way I express this, right? the more they come from the exercise of power by one of the parties. That means the agreements are not made in a spirit of equality between all the parties, but some party exercises the power upon another party, and that means that agreements will not, and contract will not be robust. That means a person, when possible, the person will look for another job, for instance, right? In a social group or in society, the satisfaction of needs is the more adequate to life of each one in the group or outside the group, the more it emanates from fraternity, solidarity, brotherhood to others. And it is the more inadequate to life, the more one seeks to achieve personal advantages. The contrary of fraternity, looking for personal advantages. So this is another social law. Well, again, I have already spoken about this. When natural laws are not followed, physical disaster occurs because physical laws do not exist independently of us. They exist independently of us. We must submit to the physical laws, natural laws. But when social laws are not followed, then the result is suffering, is misery. We are within these laws. We are their creators. The social laws are created, and it's very interesting to observe that any state law is not created based upon rationality only. There is always some feeling involved in the social laws, social state laws, right? I give an example. If I think rationally, I could suggest a law. We have excess of population in the world, so let's finish with the laws that forbid people to kill each other until we'll have a satisfiable number of people in the world. You see, this is rational, but through feelings we are against that. Maybe the representatives would think, well, if I pass these laws, I could myself be killed, right? Not myself killed. I could be killed by other people. It's also a feeling, right? So laws in general, laws in society are also have quite a bit of feeling involved. Okay, now I'd like to speak about socialism, communism, and capitalism. Oh my God, here I have another problem of animation. It's very important to know that in all social organisms, liberty, equality, and fraternity, which were Masonic ideals, and were taken by the French Revolution as its ideals. I have a lecture about liberty, equality, fraternity, past, present, and future. I'm going to touch very briefly about that, and then I talk about the origin of these three and so on. Anyhow, it seems that it has originated in ancient Greece, but I could not find this origin. So if somebody finds it, please tell me about that. My email address is on top of my my homepage. Using my name, you'll get there immediately. So each one must be applied in its specific area, which must be independent from each other. I have already talked about that. That's why they didn't work in that revolution, because they were mixed. As human systems, our systems, as Steiner introduced them, sensorial neural system, mainly in the head, rhythmic or respiratory, circulatory system, mainly in the trunk, and limbs, mainly in the motor members, right? But Steiner added something new. He also introduced the metabolic system. I'm not going to enter in the explanation why he did that. My wife could do it much better than I do. She's a doctor. Anyhow, examples of application in appropriate areas. So here we have these three should be applied in each area, right? Now let's see what happens when they are applied in inappropriate areas. Socialism means equality in the various areas. This means equality in economic life, satisfaction of needs, but we have already seen that everybody has his her own needs, different from other people, right? Spiritual life, exercising skills, art, science were planned and are planned in socialism oriented. Intellectual activities, science and so on are oriented of what the only party decides and so on. Without freedom, here should be freedom and there is no freedom, right? In the communist countries there were these quinquennial 5-year plans, involved the production, involved the art and science and so on. And it was killed. Art was killed. Russia had such a tremendous rich art. Andrei, you are from there. You know what was the artistic and artistic life in Russia. And then in the communist countries, life was art had to be exercised in the same way decided by the party. This was the same in the Nazi time in Germany, right? They called the expressionism, they called entartete Kunst, degenerate art. They even made an exhibition of this degenerate art in front of the art determined by the party, Nazi party. It was the end of art in Germany, which was also very rich in art and also sciences, right? And in socialism, who has the power commands. This is very important. Who has the power commands. And in socialism, there is also nationalization, statization. Nationalization of production means, but society should control what is produced, and not the state, right? Nationalization of education. Here in Brazil, we have public schools, but they are called public schools, but are not public schools. They are state schools. The curriculum is determined. The director is chosen by the state. The books that are chosen and so on, imposed, they are all by the state. So the schools are not free. They are not free to organize themselves, right? They should follow the same standard. All right. And we have a counterexample with 3 state universities in the state of São Paulo. One of them is my university, the University of São Paulo. These 3 universities receive a percentage of the value-added tax, right, in the whole state. And they can do whatever they wish with this money. You see the independence in terms of state. The state provides the means, the money. But the universities, they decide what to do with that money. They could improve salaries or construct buildings, whatever they wish. You understand? Now, in this sense, they are public universities. Okay? Now, capitalism is freedom in all areas. For instance, in economic life, an enterprise exists primarily to satisfy the needs of owners or shareholders. And this is ambition, selfishness of them, of the owners and so on, and not of society or employees. Steiner wrote the first writings of him or expressions of him on social organization are 3 articles in 1905, which were published in one of the magazines, the journals he edited, and the translation into English would be social life as a spiritual life. Soziale. Oh, I forgot about that. Doesn't matter. Anyhow, in these three articles, he says, imagine the difference between a factory that is enrich the owner and another factory which is organized built by someone who wants to give 200 jobs to people. You know, it's a complete different spirit that will regulate these two, will permeate these two enterprises. In capitalism, people's needs are induced by advertising, by propaganda. I think what is correct is promotion. I have this product, it has these and these and these characteristics, and it costs so and so, and then finish. And not trying to push through advertising or create needs, like Coca-Cola, for instance. There was no need for Coca-Cola. It was created, right? By propaganda and so on, right? And by the taste they put in Coca-Cola, which for me is polluted water, right? Well, anyhow, so a capitalist could think, I'm going to produce a green Coca-Cola, and it does lots of advertising and so on, and induces the people to buy and eat green Coca-Cola, right? So it's not correct, right? This is freedom in economic life. And neoliberalism, you know, so much spoken nowadays. Globalization, all this is to improve profits and not to improve the employees' lives and so on. Buying work is bought. You know, Steiner manifested himself absolutely against that. The work should be bought. No, people should receive according to their needs and not buying their work. Judicial life is buying of rights. For instance, soil. Look how advanced Steiner was. He said soil was not produced. It should not be sold, right? It should be, lent to people to build their house, to build an organization, an industry, or whatever. But it should not belong to them, right? Because soil should not belong to people, you know. Judicial lies also capitalism buys better lawyers, and there is lots of corruption. Brazil has an endemic corruption. There is corruption everywhere, from the highest positions in government to the lower persons in society, social society. There is corruption here. It's terrible, absolutely terrible. And this is what does corruption do? It buys favors, right? Right? It buys favors. It's also freedom in something that should have another spirit. Inheritance. Steiner was against inheritance. He said it's not right of people receiving something without having worked for it. You know, he was against inheritance. When somebody had a house, after dying, the house would go back to the community, right? And distribute it to another person who would have the need for it. Good. So remember here, in communism, socialism, who has the power commands. Here in capitalism, who has the capital commands, buys everything, including laws and so on, right? The communism was implementation of socialism. Now we should recognize that Marx had merits. I don't know if this is correct. Marx merits of Marx. I don't know if it should be Marx's merits. So because he had drawn attention to the social aspects, you know, the suffering of the proletarians and so on. So he was against social injustice, discrimination, inequalities. I think this was very good. He was the first to spread this world of this injustice. You know what Steiner says about the proletarians? That industrialization, the worst effect of industrialization was that it extracted from the proletarians, from the employees, their dignity. The higher classes, our social classes, the owners of the industries and so on, they preserved some what was the word? Dignity, some dignity, because they kept for them arts and intellectual life and so on, and these gave them dignity. But the works didn't have that anymore, right? Well, but Marx, I think Marx had these great merit, right? But he did very great mistakes. For instance, his solution was economic everywhere. But the human being is not just a being of needs, which economic life should provide. And he proposed a revolution of the proletarians, right? Correct, is a gradual evolution. Steiner calls the attention to the fact that when Marx says proletarians unite yourselves. Proletarians unite yourselves. This was a motto by Marx and Engels, right? In the manifest, Communist Manifest. Steiner says this is not correct because this imposes how should I say? A class mentality, right, against the others. It provides for a clash, right? We proletarians against the other. The others are our enemies, right? So this is wrong. You know, society as a whole should unite, and not just one part of it, right, against the others, which was a revolution. And there was another motto: the ends justify the means. And what did it mean? Killing more than 100 people. Communists killed more 100 million, not 100,000, I said. 100 million, not 100 million people were killed in various communist countries, in the Soviet Union, in China, in Cambodia, and so on, you know, North Korea, and so on. So more than 100 million people, more than the Second World War. The correct is the means should be identified with the ends. If we don't identify the means with the ends, we never get to the ends, right? Which was the case with communist countries. They never get there. They never got to a happy society. You know, people felt strangled, right? Well, anyhow. But why does communism attract young people? Because of its ideology, its social ideals, right? Which was very common in Europe. Maybe the propaganda against communism in the United States prevented young people to become communists, you know. But there was a saying: a young person should be communist, right? An old person that is communist has no brains, right?
Yeah.
Young people
Who is not a communist has no heart.
Young person that is not a communist has no hearts. An old person that is communist has no brains. It was a thing by your father, right? Anyhow, so there is. That's why it attracts the young people, right? And preoccupation with social aspects, because young people have a very high sense of justice. And why doesn't capitalism attract? Based on selfishness. And young people have this justice, sense of justice, you know. They want to think socially and so on. So they are not selfish yet, right? So it's based on selfishness, and this does not attract the young people. And let me advance that I have an idea that one of the main ideas why communists did not succeed is that, unfortunately, humanity is highly selfish, right? So capitalism provides for selfishness, and this is why communist countries did not succeed, also because their technology was behind. Science was directed, was planned. So science and technology was behind the West, right? Well, due to the miseries brought by communism, this is an idea of mine, a person should feel ashamed of declaring her or himself a communist. I think, communists has killed 100 million, more than 100 million people. I think a person should be feel ashamed, as I think every reasonable person should be ashamed of declaring her or himself a Nazi, right? Because Nazism has killed 600 million people with their wars and genocide and so on. So everybody, I think, should be ashamed of calling himself a Nazi. Why? People are not ashamed of being called communist. You know what? We have a official, Brazilian Communist Party. They have representatives in the parliament. Brazilian communists. I cannot understand that. What I understand that other people don't find it so strange. Well, epilogue. I'm going to go fast here because I have only 8 minutes until my 5 o'clock. It's your 3 o'clock in Chicago. So we have constructive characters and destructive characters. In here I summarized the whole thing. The three types of life, the types of organization. Associative organization is what Steiner called for productive organizations to associate with distributors and with consumers. This would be an associative organization, and so on and so forth. You can read it after you download my presentation. Now, Rudolf Steiner, only with a new education would it be possible to obtain a threefolded society against the same GA, education as a social question or something like that. Healthy imitation in the first septennial leads to individual freedom. Look how metamorphoses work. We give a healthy imitation, and this produces freedom later on. Experiencing authority with love. It's a magic expression in Waldorf education. Authority with love. Now, in the second septennial, and the fundamental primary school, leads to an equality of rights and duties in the adult life. Love for the world, experiencing, for instance, this is very important for high school students, experiencing the suffering of people in hospitals, in orphanages, and so on. Love for the world in the third septennial leads to feelings of fraternity. Experiencing the suffering of others leads to fraternity, for instance. It was one of the reasons for the introduction of Waldorf School in September 1919. And you can, those that are not acquainted with it could look at the Waldorf Education Internet. There are lots of papers, including mine. Well, anyhow, what about adults? The basic destructive characteristics are largely due to a materialist worldview. The human being is an animal, or the human being is a machine. As an animal, as Darwinism tried to impose into humanity. And I have a paper called An Extensive Review of Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, where I criticize Darwinism, right? I have an extension of Darwinism. Not all mutations and not all encounters leading to well, there is an info. I'm sorry. I think I'm getting tired. Leading to natural selection. Not all encounters leading to natural selection are random. They are oriented. That's my extension of Darwinism. Some of them. the human being is a machine, which is now the idea of most artificial intelligence. You can read my book, AI, Artificial Intelligence or Automatic Imbecility. Can machines think and feel? There is a paper, I based this book on that paper, is also on my website, and Frederick Emrine from Carrick's, from his press, Carrick's published this book. Anyhow, from the conception of animality or materiality, there could be no understanding of what human beings and society are all about. We know that very, very well from anthroposophy. And from this conception of animality and materiality, no freedom can arise. From matter, no freedom can arise. Matter has to follow physical laws, period, right? And I have a theory. How come is it possible that the spirit can influence the physical life, physical objects, physical matter without violating physical laws? I have a theory on that. It's in one of my papers on my website. And therefore, dignity without, from animality or materiality, there could be no dignity, responsibility, or individual. Higher individuality should not be superior, higher individuality, nor sense of equality or fraternity or altruistic love. Altruistic love presupposes freedom, right? So from these altruistic love cannot arise. And I think this is the developed mission of the human being today. As a matter of fact, I have a paper called The Mission of Technology. You may give a look at it. 67. Okay, I'm almost done. Humankind has already developed a sense of freedom and equality. They have even generated laws, right? We are in the glorious time of developing human rights. I call it the glorious time of developing human rights. Here in São Paulo, in Brazil, I think 15, 20 years ago, there was no sidewalk, how to say, so that people in wheelchairs could go to the sidewalk. This is very recent. And in every lift, in every elevator, there is a sign saying it's forbidden to discriminate socially, physically, or whatever. It's here you can see in every lift entrance, right? Elevator entrance, there is a mention to that law of equality law, right? Everybody should have the same rights. It didn't exist 20 years ago. So you see, we are in the glorious time of developing human rights. But if someone restricts the freedom or equality of others, I'm sorry, not but is here below. If someone restricts the freedom or equality of others, she commits a crime nowadays. But if one does not help another person in need, for instance, a person that stumbles on the sidewalk and falls, another person going by is not forced by law to help the first one, right? So not yet, because people don't feel the need for it. But I think developing fraternity, why there is this freedom and equality, the sense of freedom and equality was developed. Oh, I'm sorry, it's already 5 o'clock there, but I'm going to finish. This was done because there was a recognition, an intuitive recognition that human beings have the same essence. It's individuality. I'm sorry, her or his individuality. And this essence is of the same nature in all people. And it has no gender, sexual preference, nationality, religion, political preference, race, physical disabilities. It's the same essence. So they have people should have the same rights. Now, liberty, well, let me skip these. Liberty, equality, fraternity, we have already. I wanted to give only two two citations by Steiner from the Philosophy of Freedom. I copied from the translation by Rita Stebbing. To live in love of the action and to let live. To live in love of the action. That means the action should be done out of love to it. And to let live, other people let live. Having understanding for the other person's will is the fundamental principle of free human beings. Live in love, let live, and understanding other person's will. Free human beings. They know no other ought than that with which their will is intuitively in accord. How they shall will in a particular instance, their power of ideation will tell them. How they shall will in a particular instance, their power of ideation will tell them, and not laws and customs and so on. This is the free human being. Nature makes the human being into a product of nature. Society makes him into a being who acts rationally, I say according to laws. But she alone, she or he, individual alone, can make her or himself into a free being. At a definite stage of his development, nature releases the human being from its feathers, right? Society carries his development a stage further. The final polish, she or he can only apply her or himself. Freedom and equality appear naturally. I think fraternity, brotherhood will not appear naturally. We have to consciously develop that. And this is the paper I have already mentioned. Please, at the end, write a form with your assessment. Later on, I'll copy all the assessments into a assessment page, and make my own comments, so you can see what other people wrote about these three questions. What was the most important thing? What is the biggest remaining doubts? What are the biggest remaining doubts? And comments. And we are I do that because in presence talks, it's time people start to writing. What are we witnessing? The destruction of nature, the destruction of human being, for instance, through electronic media. And to reverse this fact, we need a scientific spirituality, which is what we know of anthroposophy. And I have a paper on that. Is there just matter, also spirit in the universe? Okay, this was all. I repeat the verse by Steiner at the beginning. Healing is only healing. A healthy group, a healthy society is only when in the mirror of the human soul, each human soul forms the whole community. Each human soul should feel the whole community. You know, the community is not an abstraction. It should be something concrete. And in the community lives the strength of the individual soul. Leaves the strength, that means the community should reflect the individual soul. The communities, one should find in the community the mirror of each individual soul, right? So I have a bibliography that you can look at when you download the presentation. And I think this is the end. I'm sorry for being 4 minutes later. I said I needed 2 hours, and I needed 2 hours and 4 minutes, 5 minutes. But I'm here at your disposition to answer questions and to talk about these ideas. You know, some people certainly could contribute with some more knowledge on other areas that I didn't cover in this lecture. On the subject of social threefold. Very, very many thanks for your attention, and for Andre to have organized this talk. And especially it was the first talk I gave in English since tens of years. I gave a talk in English in Germany. So it was nice to me to see that I still can bubble, I can't say not bubble, bubble some words, you know. Okay, here I am.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Valdemar, for your very intensive and long lecture. So I think it's enough material for one book, one big book. Yeah, I would like to move, but in the beginning, I would like to suggest a break for 3-4 minutes, and you can move around. I mean, specifically for those who would like to continue and ask questions. So, I mean, you can move around, have a sip of water, and we will be back like in 3-4 minutes. Thank you.
Do we have time, Andrei?
We have time because, yes, yeah, specifically for those who are strong enough, or Valdemar, how do you feel about giving some answers if people having questions? Let's put this question. You
No
good?
problem.
No
No
problem.
problem. I'm
Okay.
in good shape. I took my
You're in good
swimming this
shape.
morning and I'm in good shape. But I'm
Yeah.
going to stand
I
up
know
a
some
little
people
bit.
probably a little
Just
tired. That's why I would suggest a break and come back who is strong enough, and have a conversation with you. Like in 3 minutes we will be
yes,
back.
okay. Não entendi. Sim, devia ter fechado. Já está funcionando aqui. Pode, podia. Andre, are the microphones open?
Yeah, dear friends, we are back. So we have 22 people online who stayed for section of questions and answers. Yeah,
Yes.
Valdemar, we have to wait a little bit. People are still probably having sip of water or moving around, and
But if someone is there and could wanted to make a question, there is no problem.
yeah. So, dear friends, for this particular section, we're going to use our chat window. It is not necessarily to type all your question, but just put your name and Q and dot. So in this way, we're going to
How about
create a virtual line, and the order: who was first, who was second, who was third, and we will proceed.
and then
Um,
questions will be made by voice, right?
yes, we would like to hear your voices, and as I understand, let me just check.
Talvez você possa ajudar, Sônia.
Yeah, and Charlene L. Charlene was first. Charlene, could you please unmute yourself and ask your question? Yeah, unmute yourself, Charlene.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. A lot of information. And I appreciated what you said about schools, because I hadn't really thought of them that way. I had put education, schools, the spiritual, cultural, freedom sphere. So my question is, I was thinking about medicine, how you would look at medicine. And then that comes up to another question. Do you look at education in the spiritual and schools and the economic, or is it schools and education both in the economic primarily, and then medicine versus hospitals, clinics? So a couple of questions within that one question. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. Charlene?
Yes.
Well, I said that I classify schools as being part of economic life, in the sense that economic life is there to satisfy means. Befriedigung in German, satisfaction of needs, but they are not physical needs. And I call the attention that each teacher in his class is a representative of the spiritual life. Now, people say that school should be free, right? Freedom has something to do with the spiritual life, right? In German, many Waldorf schools are called free Waldorf schools, freie Waldorfschulen. Also in Holland, they are also called free Waldorf schools. Free in which sense? They are free from the state. The state has no influence on these schools, absolutely no influence on those schools. Some states in Germany provide means, provide buildings, provide money eventually for the schools, so that the parents have, for Waldorf schools, so that parents have to pay less. They always pay a little bit, but don't pay their full. There is a name for that in English. My goodness, fee, not fee, doesn't matter. So the school is free from the state. That's why they are called free Waldorf schools. They also should be free as any organization. Any factory should be free, right, in some sense. In terms that the state should not tell what the industry should produce. Society should do that as long as the factory, the industry, recognize that it is providing means, it is satisfying needs. I'm satisfying needs of the people, right? So they should be regulated by that. But they should be free to produce those goods, the way they find more proper, right? So each organization, each group, each individual should have some freedom, right? But this does not mean that the main spirit in some activity is the spirit of freedom, the spirit of equality, or a spirit of fraternity, right? So I think the main spirit of a school should be that of a fraternity, providing the needs of the means to satisfy the needs of the students and their parents. So interesting that you made a distinction between schools and education. I don't know, I have not thought that maybe there should be a difference between them. I always consider schools as such, right, as institution, school. Maybe, but the school provides education, right, as a whole, provides education, which is a need from the children and young people, right? So education is what schools produce, which is not a physical good, right? This is the way I can think at this time, right, at this moment. About medicine, I don't know if my wife, she's a doctor, I don't know if she has something to say, but it's the same thing. What does a hospital do? Provides the needs of cure, of what?
Healthy, for sick people.
Yeah, for needs of sick people go to the hospital because they have a need of being cured. So the school, I think the hospitals should also consider themselves part of economic life as a whole. Now, the doctor, when the doctor is attending a patient, he is a representative of the spiritual life. He should have the freedom to prescribe, to examine whatever he finds better, right? So he's a representative but he himself could regard himself as providing needs for the patients, right? So he should have, as maybe as his main spirit. What are the needs of my parents? Patients, I'm sorry. What are the needs of my patients? What should I do to provide the means to cure my patients, and not to satisfy my egoism of being a good doctor or doing research with my patients or whatever, right? I think the main from the doctor himself as the teacher should regard his patients, the doctor, as people with some needs, right? But this hospital as a whole, I think, should be classified in the economic life.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if this was clear.
Yeah, well, it was helpful. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Valdemar. And question from Sandra. Yeah, another thing, some friends are asking for bibliography from you. And if you can share the screen and answer the question of Sandra, well, it will be
Yes, well, I closed the presentation. I'll have to open it again, no problem.
Okay, so it will come later. So Sandra, what is your question? Could you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, okay. So I wrote in the chat, here's what I wrote. In our world today, I can't help but wonder about the vaccine question in light of the presentation. Do people have a social responsibility to get vaccinated, or does doing that when an individual has objections to the vaccine violate individual freedom? And I just said I've been struggling with this question for some time. I have friends who have a different perspective from mine, just to put it simply. It's not an easy, obvious answer.
Well, this is a very complicated situation.
Exactly.
In terms of the social three order, or the threefold order, one should not impose anything on anybody. One should not force anybody to do anything. This means that the person should have the freedom of choosing to be vaccinated or not. Now, if the person has the social threefolding right in his mind, if he has love, altruistic love for other people, he'll get vaccinated because he will prevent other people of not being infected. You understand? So I think this is the same thing as abortion. I'm against abortion, but I think it's a problem of the mother and father. They have to decide if they do abortion or not. I am against it, but I cannot force a person to not to do it. There are also complications there, you know, lawful complications, if it's lawful or not, you know. We could discuss that, but in principle, I think this way. One should not force people to get vaccinated. We should show people that it's important for them to get vaccinated in order not to infect other people. Simple like that. And they have to decide. And we hope that not many people will decide not to take the vaccination, because if many people don't take the vaccination, the pandemic will not go away. Or maybe it will go away after many people will have died, you know, without really having had to die, which was the case here in Brazil. Our president was against vaccination, against isolation, social isolation, against using masks. Our president, and he gave the example. You know, he went to crowds, you know, without mask and so on. He gave the example, and the government started buying the vaccines much later than other countries. So there is a calculation of about 100,000 people, at least 100,000 people died because of his measures or lack of measures or example. Is that correct?
Thank you. I've arrived at pretty much the same understanding. And of course, it's still a dilemma. I mean, you are outlining the very dilemma that I feel like we're living with these days, and that you've done it very clearly. Thank you.
Yes, Sandra. There is a big problem here, you know. Social threefolding will only be implemented when people are first spiritualists, not materialists, right?
Right.
And they have a very precise understanding of what is the human being constitution, mainly the spiritual constitution. Without that, you know, Steiner began always with this human constitution. Without a good understanding of what the human constitution is, one cannot take correct measures. So, and it's a big problem, because how many of us are there in the world? So few, you know. And without that, there is no hope that humankind will improve. You know, it's a very big problem, and we cannot impose that on people. They have to develop themselves. They have to find their way, their own way. Each one has to find her own way.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, dear friends, more questions, or we are done for this session. So I have
Or contributions. Contributions. If somebody would like to say
if you need
something
some
in
contributions.
parallel,
Yeah.
other subjects. The advantage of being an anthroposophist is that in general we can dissert, how to say, we can speak about almost everything.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
if we have other questions, my wife could also help.
Well, yeah, please, questions or statements.
Statements.
Okay.
I have put on the chat the addresses of the presentation and the assessment form. Please copy it into how to say, any editor, right? Oh yes,
I have one last
the bibliography. I'm
question.
sorry.
Um,
I'm sorry.
Valdemar,
Valdemar.
here's question for Claire.
yes.
Yeah.
The one last question is, and I've been listening and so impressed with your presentation. It's made the threefold social order so much more understandable for me. And I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on this huge upsurge in right-wing dictators, this wish in populations for dictators? You know, we had Trump in the United States, you have Bolsonaro, we have
Yes.
Boris Johnson in Britain and Brexit.
Hungary.
When you read the social signs, what do you see this as a symptom of?
Of materialism.
Materialism.
Materialism, I'm sorry. Materialism. Because if people, you know, and this applies also to almost all religions, right? Which are in fact materialistic religions. For instance, when they use special garments, a special place to pray, like a church or mosque or temple, synagogue, you know, all these are material aspects, right? And I think without a real spiritualism, there is no hope, because you know, from matter, from an animal, only egoism can arise. You know, look at trees and animals. What are their purpose, you know, for themselves? The survival of the individual and the species. There is no other mission for them. You know, only if we think spiritually, then there could be another thing. But if you look at an animal or a plant, a tree grows and makes shadow to other trees or plants underneath it. You know, they'll die. It doesn't matter. That tree wants to get as much light as possible. So trees and animals, they are egoistic, right? Only human beings can be altruistic, right? But for being altruistic, you should not think materialistic in a materialistic way. From materialism, there is no possibility of having freedom. You know, there is a famous philosopher, American philosopher, Daniel Dennett. I have his book, Freedom Evolves. You know, he tries to show how freedom has evolved from Darwinian points of view. You know, it's garbage, right? And I think the main problem here is that people are not spiritual enough mainly in terms of knowing what is the spiritual constitution of each human being. If they would
Of each
recognize
human
that,
being.
yeah, if we recognize that there is an I, there is a higher I in each person, you know, and this I is here to develop a free will and develop altruistic love, you know, things would be completely different. And I think uh, these wave of rightist governments and so on, and people voting for rightist governments, you know, it's lack of knowledge, lack of feeling also, not just the rational, it's also lack of feeling, lack of compassion, you know. This, the extreme leftists or extreme rightists have no compassion whatsoever, you know. It's terrible. And what is producing that? Technology. Technology is producing these mentalities, this way of thinking, right? I'm trying to. I'm sorry. I'm trying to insert. Oh yes, here it is. Yes. Okay. I have already inserted the bibliography into the chat. I thought I was not doing it because the last line is a link, so I thought it was a link to the presentation. So and what is the hope? Unfortunately, the hope is education. That was the origin of Waldorf schools. But education takes a long, long time. So I don't see a bright future in the short time. Yes, as my wife said, I don't. In fact, I'm sorry to say that, but I think things will get worse. Why? Because suppose things would get automatically, naturally better. Suppose they would get better. Then we would cross our arms and wait until it would get better. Now, if things in social terms, psychological terms, and so on, you know, if they get always worse, we are called to action. We are called to consciousness. We have to fight against the evil, right, in the world. If there would be only goodness in the world, we would not fight. We would not develop ourselves. We would just, you know, how to say, gozar. We would just enjoy, you know, the goodness in the world. So I'm very sorry. I have this idea that the world will get worse and worse, depending on us, depending on the human being. If it continues as it is, it will get worse, right? But this does not mean that groups could improve instead of degenerate, right? So groups could not fall and irradiate that. That's their mission. They should irradiate that to the other people, not just close themselves and enjoy their goodness, right? This is remember the end of the book How to Attain Knowledge World, the high world, right? At the end, Steiner says, if somebody develops herself or himself to the point that he or herself doesn't have to incarnate anymore, he has to come back. He has to stay here. You're not disincarnate. He has to stay here to help other people, right? And he called this the white path. The other is the shadow, let me say correctly, politically correctly, the shadow, the obscure path, right? The right path, the white path is that we help other people. So it's wrong when we create a group, a society that isolates itself from the evil in the world. This is very bad.
Thank you so much. And thank you for a brilliant lecture.
Okay. Anything else? Please feel free.
Dear friends, we are working already 2 hours and 36 minutes, and I feel it's a good point to conclude our session and say thank you to Valdemar for his detailed presentation. Very intense. Thank you so much. Yes, its session is was recorded, and you can find it on our website, or I can send it to you upon request. I think you know my my email. And I would like to also invite you for next event, which will be on Monday, 26th, which is celebration of life of Sergei Prokofiev. So this presentation of Peter Selk, and also we're going to perform Russian Belina, which is a Russian song about Russian heroes, etc. And this is something which is Sergei Prokofiev did research on, spiritual research. So, and also we, in affiliation with Mistec, Andrea Linnell is here. Andrea, are you live? You here? So he is not hearing us. So anyway, August.
I am hearing you, sorry.
Yes, Andrew, can you reveal your face, if it's possible?
Well, I'm in the
So,
basement.
yeah, I'm going to already invite people for Mistec conference, and specifically, we are collaborating on making event with Johannes Kuhl again.
Yes,
So it's gonna happen on August 14th. If you have more information, please feel free to tell people, and we will conclude our session.
Yes, I would like to say that Sergei Prokofiev was our friend, me and my wife. And my wife used to translate his lectures, which he gave in German, right? In many places here in Brazil. And one of these places was the Pantanal. It's a flooded area in general, where there are lots of wild animals, lots of wild animals. And he went to that state, gave a lecture at the Waldorf School, and then they went to the Pantanal, to a farm there. And in this farm, there was an alligator that was this alligator would come to get food, right? And it had a name, and the name was Tchaikovsky, right? So people would call the alligator Tchaikovsky, and the alligator would come and would receive some food, some fish, some food. And once Prokofiev went to give a fish to the alligator, and he said, Prokofiev is feeding Tchaikovsky.
Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you so much again, Valdemar and Sonia. Thank you to everyone for participation. And please feel free to unmute yourself and say thank you to Valdemar, and we will finish the session. Thank you.
thank you, Valdemar.
Thank you, Valdemar.
Bye.
Thank you for the hugs. Hi, Claire.
Hi. Hello.
Bye, Eve.
From far away.
Hi there, Andrew.
Bye.